clicked on live a little bit before, so I want to make sure I came in here the right way. So I'm just going to go ahead and check on my iPad that we're streaming the title with the true crime live. Let's see here. So while I wait for a few of you to get in here, it says upcoming. See if this is the right one. Yes. Okay, cool. While I wait for a few of you to get in here. So I've been watching the whole fiasco with Lori Vallow. If there's a few good true crime channels if you want to follow to kind of catch up on the story if you don't already know. There's It's a Crime is a really good one. I believe she has a playlist, Linda. She's also born on April 11th. That's why it's called Rotation 411, is because that's my birthday. We like to put patterns together, whether it be with astrology or for Linda, it's true crime. Anyways, another good channel is Hidden True Crime. So I was watching that. I was watching sort of the unfolding of Lori Vallow representing herself, and I finally got the gusto to go ahead and run all of the charts, which is really easy to do on divinetimingdatabase.com/stars. I was able to put in Lori Vallow's birthday up here, and then I put in each husband that I could find, and I didn't have to keep retyping her birthday. It'll just open a new window. So it's very nice if you need to pull up a lot of charts. But I went ahead and did Lori and Chad, and then I ran Lori, which is her fifth husband, who she's currently married to. And just for a quick recap, they were both convicted of murdering her children and his wife, or conspiracy to murder his wife. Also, it is interesting that in some of the case discovery, you did see a Google search. I believe it was Chad that Google searched, is Leo compatible with Cancer? Also, I know I watch her son's channel, Colby Ryan's channel, and they all are very Christian, but they did mention that him and his wife, he's an Aries and she's a Capricorn. So it's like, as much as everybody, says astrology is bad, it's still a little bit, in the mainstream. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into it. I hope that I don't want to, you know, I know the families don't necessarily believe in astrology, but they have mentioned the sun signs. And also, I have done other true crime. I believe I did Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein's was one of the true crimes I've done, but we usually do celebrity Synastry lives. And Synastry is where we look at the charts and how they interact. It's what I specialize in. So if you ever want a reading from me on, it's called Romance Compatibility on my website. It's rotation411.com. I can look into yours, or if you just want to run it yourself, you can go to divinetimingdatabase.com, and then you can click on the menu compatibility report, or you can hit /stars, and it will take you to this, and you can type this in. Right now I have it where it just sort of boldly pushes out. I'll show you guys. I don't know how well you can see it on here, but this is Lori and Chad's Synastry chart here. And so if we go all the way down, I have the descriptions where it will sort of pop out at you, what's the most significant. Eventually I'm going to go in. There's a few that are significant, but not like there's good and bad one. I've got the best ones and the worst ones in there right now, but there's some in between that are significant that I need to put in as well. But I do love it as a tool while I'm working with clients. I can just skim really quickly and see what's going on with them. So with that being said, I was able to find, I had tried to look this stuff up earlier on, but now everything has become a lot more public. So I looked up Lori and Chad, that's her fifth husband. And then I looked up Lori and Charles, that was her fourth husband that her brother murdered. And then I was able to find her brother's birthday. So I looked up Lori and her brother, Alex Cox. I also looked up Lori and her son, Colby. No disrespect to Colby. I know he's going through a lot. I watch his channel, but I don't know his exact birthday. I know he's an Aries, and I was able to see that he was born in 1996. I believe he did say the month and day, but I just remember him saying he's an Aries and his wife's Capricorn. So I put early April for him, and we can sort of see the generational aspects there. And then I did look up at the very end, right before I popped on, I looked up Chad and Tami Daybell, which was kind of interesting as well. So I'm going to start with Lori and Chad because they're the most, infamous two. They're the two that have been convicted of murdering her children and his wife. And now she's going to trial, and she's going to represent herself, they deemed today. Hi, Carol. So we're going to go ahead and see here, I'm going to go over the most significant aspects because there are so many different couplings here, and you guys can see how this plays out in reality. So, Lori and Chad's uh, Synastry chart, I always kind of just go over, if I'm going over a chart quickly and we're not going super in depth. So like if you go to my romance compatibility package, you can get a super in-depth package, or you can just do like one of my Q&A readings, which I think are marked as tarot readings, and I can just do a brief one like this. Hi, Rihan. Okay, so basically what I first look to is the moon signs, and then whether there are any malefic or divorce aspects between the two. And then after that, if I have time, I sort of go into the good stuff, unless there's really good stuff. So you'll see how I do this right now. Hi, Carol. Okay. Thanks for all the love there, the smiles. All right. So as far as their moons go, um, I'm not going to go into them too much yet because I don't want to lose you guys, but I did go down to see whether there are any, divorce aspects. So Lori and Chad have Mars trine Mars, which means Mars is our planet of action, ambition, physical libido, and how we go about doing things. So this shows that they had a very strong physical attraction to each other. It also shows that whatever one wanted to do, the other very much was in alignment with. Let's see what signs this is happening in real quick. I'll scroll back up. Aries and Leo. Okay. So, and it's an exact trine to at 3 degrees Aries and 3 degrees Leo. So they had a very strong physical attraction to one another. They also had Jupiter square Neptune. Now, this is one I do see in long-term marriages, but it is one, if you go here and you put in your own birthdays, you can read the definition, or you can put in their birthdays as well. So if you want to read the Jupiter square Neptune definition, Lori's birthday was June 26th, 1973. And Chad's is August 11th, 1968. You can go to divinetimingdatabase.com/stars and you can look at what I'm looking at here. Exactly to the written letter. Now, there are some typos in there. I've got a lot to write and only so much time in a day. I am from the west coast of the United States. All right, so after we see Jupiter square Neptune, this is one that can work in marriages. It's a little bit of a yellow flag. So if like you enter moonmatch.love to find your perfect astrological match, and you might have Jupiter square Neptune with one of your potential best matches, okay? So it does work, but it's one where the two can kind of overpromise, or it's like they can plan a huge wedding and then they end up having to just get married at the local chapel, and they might be just fine with that depending on the other aspects, or one might be extremely disappointed. So that's sort of how Jupiter square Neptune plays out. So that could be sort of what played into their grand master plan. Neptune can rule delusion, and Jupiter is grandiosity in its shadow side. So Jupiter square Neptune, a square obviously doesn't play out the best. That's why these two had this grandiose plan. And probably Neptune is also spirituality as far as spiritualness, and Jupiter is dogma, why they have this religious connotation as well. Jupiter is also marriage, and again, so that's why I always use the wedding example, like planning a huge wedding, but then having to sort of settle for the reality of your financial or your logistic situation. Anyways, then we go down, and the next thing that pops out to me is Saturn square Pluto. So if you've been following me at all, or you've watched any of my deal breaker divorce aspect videos, this is the one that I'm like, if ever there was a purpose for astrology or synastry, the way that I see Saturn square Pluto play out, this is why I'm doing this work. Okay. I've had clients come to me, and I feel like they probably feel like if they watch this that I'm calling them out or something, but no, I've seen it consistently over and over and over again. If you have Saturn square Pluto with someone, you can check right now if you know their month, day, and year. You don't need, a lot of people are like, you need the birth time to know. No, you don't. You can see these are generational, slow moving planets. You can see if you have this with someone. Go to divinetimingdatabase.com/stars, put in your birth dates, and make sure you don't have Saturn square Pluto, because run for the hills is all I can say. I'll quickly read you the definition in here. I know it's a little monotonous. I am not Russian. I do have a grandfather that was a first generation from Germany in America. So anyways, that could be where people think that I'm Russian. But a deal breaker divorce aspect. There is a huge Russian population in the city where I'm from as well. So there is some influence. I have a lot of Russian friends, but anyways, Saturn square Pluto, a deal breaker divorce aspect. This is the worst aspect that exists. Terrible struggles over finances and resources are to be foretold. Avoid this aspect. And then in bold letters, I wrote, run for the hills. Seen in a majority of really terrible custody battles, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard had this aspect. You will lose yourself as you find yourself battling to win at all costs. All the effort, time, and resources that you invest into trying to make this work. You will deeply regret in hindsight and feel a tremendous negativity around wanting to recoup your losses. See, there are typos. Tremendous is spelled with an M instead of an N, two M's. I have to go in and correct that. But this one could definitely make you bitter towards future relationships and your outlook on relationships in general, and is pretty much guaranteed to scar you for life, whether you are Lori or Chad. See, now they're not actually written in here. There's a cool thing in this where I can write it. So if you put your names in and you have this, it'll say your names. But it says whether you are Lori or Chad. Or if you put yourself in and you have it with someone, it will say your names there. So that's kind of cool. But one of the reasons I created, and then I'm like going, okay, I put Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Did I put Lori? Did I already know Lori and Chad had this? Okay. One of the reasons I created all of this content is to warn the world about this aspect. Although divorce attorneys would suffer significant financial losses if the world were made aware to avoid Saturn square Pluto type coupling. Good luck making it past the 7-year itch with this one. So I was doing the math on this, and I believe they met in like 2017. I've watched tons of videos on them. I kind of just watched that stuff in the background. It was during the pandemic. I got really lonely. I was single at the time, and I did like a year of celibacy. And my mom, I was like, I'm so lonely. And she's like, watch true crime. So I was like, I don't know. Now I'm not single. And my man's like, you're so weird. You watch all this morbid stuff. But the point of the matter is that they did, I believe, get married late 2019, early 2020. So they've only been married 4 or 5 years. They are still legally married. But what has transpired from their marriage? A ton of legal, I always say I see this in the worst divorce and custody battles. But in this case, it is a little bit different with Chad and Lori because we're not seeing them in custody or divorce battle. We're seeing them in a battle over murdered, a court battle over murdered children. So it's like custody of deceased children. It's very bizarre. And she was in all these custody battles, like with her third husband, which I tried to find Joseph Ryan's birthday. I couldn't find it right now, but if I do, we'll do part 2 to this. I'm sure I've come across it. So, it's very interesting. I think I said Mars conjunct Pluto in the natal chart can, like if somebody has that in their birth chart, can represent them being murdered, or it can represent them having great wealth and power, like Eddie Murphy has it, and he's been like one of the greatest, most success. I don't want to say greatest because everyone has their different tastes, but he's been one of the most commercially successful comedians of all time. Mars conjunct Pluto, but other people. I had a Aries friend who was 4 days younger than me, who was can I say the word, unalived at a house party. So that's another way that Mars conjunct Pluto can play out in the natal chart. It can either give you great power, and it depends on the aspects to it and the house system as well, or it can bring you sort of this early demise by the hands of another. So I don't really connotate Saturn square Pluto with unaliving, although Saturn is about sacrifice and Pluto is about death and rebirth, not reincarnation, but well, kind of reincarnation, like regeneration is the way I like to look at Pluto more so. Reproductive is the 8th house of Pluto, because I like to not look at it in such a negative light, but Pluto can definitely do some major damage if you don't handle him correctly and you're not aware, which is why it is good to get your birth chart read and to run your synastry charts, because if you're just if you're interested enough in astrology, I don't care how religious you are, to look up your horoscope, if whatever your sun sign is, and to look up, are you compatible Leo and Cancer like Chad did with Lori, then you might as well dig deep enough to see if you have these aspects with someone, okay? Because this is really what's going to count. Like any Leo and Aries, my 11th house is Leo, so that's my wish fulfillment. So I've always had a thing for Leos, but it didn't ever work out. So I would blame it. Well, I like Leos, but it doesn't work out. And that's actually where I cracked the code, was looking at a Leo chart. I'm like, oh, we have Mars square Jupiter. And now, oh, I looked, oh, I have that with Mars square Saturn and Jupiter with every Leo I tried to date. That's why I didn't work out with any of the Leos I was trying to date. It wasn't the actual, that Leo I don't get along with well, which I do. It was the reason it wasn't working out was the aspect. So if you're going to Google ever, are we compatible based on your sun signs, which is the signs or, what's coming up for me this year as a Leo, you might as well just dig a little deeper. And you don't have to believe in it, but you might, if you want to know the true compatibility, you want to look into the synastry. Now, anyways, we have, so I wasn't able to confirm Chad's moon, but I was able to confirm Lori and Charles moons. Now, because I tell you, the first thing I look at is, are there any deal breaker or divorce aspects with Chad and Lori? There's the worst malefic aspect. It definitely would have and may still end in a divorce. I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple years, especially after this fiasco she's going to pull in Arizona, especially if she tries to like use him as a witness or anything, that they may end up divorced in the next couple of years. But at the very least, it still fulfilled the prophecy of they are going through a very bad court battle. Now, custody or divorce, here it's just this crazy court battle over children being unalived and other divorces, or them not wanting to divorce their spouses and choosing another route instead. So again, if you don't know the details, you might want to find just a quick timeline video. There's like, any true long crime, East Idaho news, it's a crime. They all have plenty of timelines and on the details. There's also the Netflix special, Sins of Our Mother, if you just want to get sort of the details and background. I know most of us are familiar with this, but even in my family, I'll be like, oh, that Lori Vallow, like they don't know what I'm talking about. So not everyone knows, but if you know and you have any interest in astrology, this should be interesting to you. So before I sort of jump into Lori and Chad's moons, I want to go to Charles. Charles was her fourth husband, not her brother, unalived, just in case you don't know. So Charles and Lori actually have pretty good synastry here. Their moons are trine. So I was able to confirm 100% that Lori's moon is in the sign of Taurus based on her birthplace and date. I don't know the exact degree because I don't have her birth time. I was able to 100% confirm that Charles Vallow's moon is in the sign of Capricorn, even though I don't have his birth time. So you can go to Astro, and this actually, you can do it in the Divine Timing Database if you want to make your own database, but if you just want to do it quickly, this isn't any site that I'm affiliated with making, but astro-seek.com, you can do a quick not knowing the moon sign or birth time unknown with the time and place, and it will give you, I can show you because I did Tami's last. This is Tami's, I believe. No, this might be Alex Cox I did last because I went through all their moons. So on this one, if you go to astro-seek.com and do the unknown birth time, but you have their place of birth, like right here, Alex Cox. Oh man, it keeps flipping on me. I guess if I turn it sideways, you can see here, it will give you like the range of where the moon is. And then over here on the right, because I'm like going, oh, it looks pretty solidly in Virgo there, right? Because it's right on the cusp of Virgo. But right here it says, the first, if he's born at like 12 a.m., his moon would have been 29 degrees Leo. If he's born at noon, his moon would be 6 degrees Virgo. And if he was born at close to midnight, 23:59 p.m. or like 11:59 p.m., his moon would be 13 degrees Virgo. So unless he was born at like 12:30 or 12:01 a.m., his moon is in Virgo. So so I was able to pretty much confirm those three, but that's something I'll kind of cover a little more later on the confusing ones that I wasn't able to cover because I don't want to lose you guys. So let's go over the meat and potatoes first. The moons are really important for, are they going to live well together? Are they going to be able to be together for life? So often if a couple has a nice synastry chart, but their moons are not compatible, we see them breaking up around 10 years, where they just like all of a sudden, just one doesn't feel emotionally fulfilled or the other one sort of just leaves inexplicably. or you can see where the in-laws don't get along because the moon rules the mother. The mother might not like, you know, the spouse, or it can be hard to move in together. Sometimes their motherlands can be different. So like if I see a case where somebody's from India and they've got to go back home, and somebody lives in the United States, often, and it's a nice harmonious chart, it can be sort of the moons are not compatible, the motherland, and they can't actually live in the same place. And usually it has more to do with foreign countries than with so much like different states. But anyways, so let's go into Lori and Charles. Their moons were 100% trine. To what degree, I don't know, but in friendly signs, Taurus and Capricorn, and both in early to mid degrees. So a pretty, you know, the moon has a 10-degree moiety or orb, so it's most likely that their moons had a significant trine, and I do believe this is why this was her longest marriage, right? Now, it wasn't all, you know, what's it? Sunshine, lollipops, and roses, as we like to say, because, see here, they did have Jupiter square Neptune. That won't break a couple up. So they might have had bigger plans and they were able to fulfill, although I do feel that they did fulfill some great plans that other people that, you know, at least where I'm from, people don't really travel much. They're kind of stuck and stagnant. So, and then I lived in Los Angeles for many years and people travel all the time. So I'm going to say Jupiter square Neptune, you know, living in Hawaii, having the business they had, having the houses they had, they definitely were able to fulfill more of these Jupiter square Neptune things. But they did have Mars square Saturn. Now, this is where I do feel that you know, I say with Mars square Saturn, it can be hard to get together. It can kind of play out like Mars square Jupiter, where it's kind of a few month long fling or 2 to 3 year relationship that doesn't go all the way to marriage, or it can be where they get married right away and they're married for 5 or 6 years. So we do see with Mars square Saturn an exception that I believe, and I'm just throwing this out there, this isn't totally factual. I believe Lori and, oh, this is, oh, no. Oh, I guess I put Chad's name in there too. I didn't switch it to Charles, but this is Charles's birthday. So I do believe that the reason, you know, this is an exception. Lori and Charles being married for more than 5 or 6 years with Mars square Saturn is a rare exception. And I believe one of you that follows me, and I can't remember your name off the top of the head, but you were interacting with me quite a bit for a while. I think you have this with your long-term wife too, Mars square Saturn, but it might be in opposition. You see that slip through more. But one second, I'm going to clear my. I'm talking 1,000 miles per minute here because I know I see you guys going in and out, and I don't want to lose you. But I shouldn't focus on that because the playback, some of you actually will, you know, soak this up a little more, that know a little bit more about astrology. But this is one of those instances where I feel that the moons probably overpowered the divorce aspect for a while. Okay. It doesn't mean they're not ultimately going to get divorced or, you know, have terrible circumstances. You know, Mars is the god of war and Saturn is the god of sacrifice. So Mars square Saturn, he was sort of sacrificed in war. It was her Saturn that sacrificed Charles. And he was trying to kind of war against what she was doing, Mars. Like he was aggravated by what was going on, understandably so. And when he showed his aggravation, she basically sacrificed him. Now, another thing aside, so I always tell you guys, the best two romance aspects that anyone can have is harmonious moons, like a nice tight orb moon conjunction or trine, and Venus conjunct or trine Mars. And here we have men are from Mars, women are from Venus, so it works the best when the woman is Venus and the man is Mars. So their moons were trine and they had Venus trine Mars. This is why I believe they were able to make it much longer, but I'm sure anybody who knows them intimately or even themselves would know that probably around 5 or 6 years is when things probably started getting really rocky between them. But it took about 10 or 11 years, I believe, is how long they were married. Don't quote me on that, but I do believe it's somewhere in there. It might even have been as long as like 15 years before something sort of rocked the boat and upset the status quo. But I do believe that these two, you know, did definitely love each other, Lori and Charles, and they were very compatible. But Mars square Saturn did ultimately get the best of them. But I do feel this is why they were able to stay together 2 to 3 times longer before ish hit the fan. Okay. Now going into Lori and Colby just very quickly, because I don't want to be disrespectful to Colby. Like I said, they're very religious, but they did mention their sun signs. really quick, I don't have his exact birthday, but I know he's got to be around early April. Like he's an Aries, born in 1996, so he's late March or late or mid-April. So I just did early April. We do see Saturn square Saturn here. Saturn represents the father in synastry and longevity. So Saturn square Saturn, the way it plays out with couples, just a quick synopsis, this is kind of a side note. It's not dealing with this case so much or any of them. Saturn square Saturn, I generally see play out where the couple will either be married to other people and have other duties and obligations. This is like in a romantic relationship, but then we're going to apply it to a familial one here in a moment. Or it can be where they are together for a very long time, like 15 years. Well, usually this is the opposition. And then they'll finally tie the knot. They're that couple that's like, we don't need to put it on paper. Why do we need to do that? That's usually Saturn opposition Saturn. But I feel for this instance, since they're mother and son, Colby says he never knew his father. Saturn is the father. And her Saturn sort of in a square to his Saturn took that away from him to some extent. Or maybe perhaps if it's not her fault, chose the wrong father for wrong, he's born, everything happens for a reason to a certain extent. But this is where there's the conflict with the father, or maybe having several fathers and divorces, in his background is Saturn square Saturn. And I do believe it's ultimately why these two have separate lives. It may have actually kind of protected him. Now he's able to go on, at least with his family, and he was the only surviving child. His Saturn may have actually kind of protected him in this square from her sacrificing the other children. That's just the way I'm going to put it. Unaliving is how some people put it. They do have Mars sextile Jupiter, so I do feel like they did get along, and they have her Mars is sextile his Venus. Now, I love this in a parent-child relationship. The sextile, for anyone, whether it's male, female, or whatever, is a little bit more of a friendship aspect. And we're going to get into that a little more with one of the other charts. But I've told you guys, I'll see this a lot, especially with the male child. I'll see the male's Venus conjunct the mother or the father's Mars. So that is a pretty, and in a conjunction, it's usually a very tight-knit relationship. Usually that male child really takes to that parent. So I've seen two primary examples, but I have seen it, while I'm working with clients. I've seen two cases in particular, though, that of people that I know the mother and son, and the son's Venus is conjunct the mother's Mars, and they're very tight knit. And then another person that I know, his Venus is conjunct his father's Mars, and he loves his mother and everything, but he really had a tight bond with his father who passed away. So, I'm like, okay, Mars and Venus are the eternal lovers. They're great for romantic relationships, but we'll often see them. And another thing is it's always the parents' Mars. So if I were to look and I would go, okay, maybe that mother I'm talking about, her Mars is in the 5th house. So I would have said she's going to have a boy. And then she has a boy born with his Venus there. So he loves his mother. That's kind of how it's playing out there. Or that man, if I would have looked at his Mars and said, okay, his Mars is overlaying into the mother's 5th house. And then they have a son born. Okay, that's why astrology is predictive. We've been doing the outer planets and their cycles series. If you are interested, in the planets and how they play out. And we've talked about, Liz Green says you can't really predict things. I do believe in predictive astrology. I know it's a little taboo, but she's like, everything's in hindsight. I don't know. Anyways, now the other interesting things, we were speaking about Saturn square Pluto with Chad and Lori. Colby does have Saturn opposition Pluto with his mother. Now, again, in especially like parent-child relationships, they can have these malefic oppositions and squares and still have somewhat of a normal relationship. You do want to be careful, if this parent is influencing you or holding you back or teaching you, especially like Saturn opposition Pluto with a parent-child could be like a learned helplessness. And in this case, I do feel it'd be like her kind of being learned helplessness. But, that is one where that's not necessarily going to cause them to disown each other, Saturn opposition Pluto, but it definitely is going to help him in the disowning of her. Saturn square Saturn more so maybe where it came to the point where they have to go their separate ways in the long term, right? Because Saturn rules longevity. He's the father of time. Now, I just wanted to quickly go over that because I thought it was interesting. I'm going to X out of... Oh, and also since I have no idea what his birthday is, I have no idea what his moon is. I'm going to X out of that. There was just some quick notes I saw about Colby and his mom. They did have a nice relationship when they were just, around each other. But yes, there's some very malefic stuff there, karmic Saturn stuff. And this is why, you know, they ultimately had to go their separate ways. But with Saturn square Saturn, again, it may have been easy for him to just leave her, you know, say, you know, you're in the past, you're in the dust. But with Saturn opposition Pluto, this could be where we see she may reel him into this trial in Arizona, especially representing herself. And he's going on at 6 p.m. I don't know if it's Pacific Standard Time, and I'm anxious to see what he has to say about this. It's been kind of unfolding over the last week or two. And again, Hidden True Crime has touched on it, but I haven't. I've been waiting for him to speak on it. Now that it's official, I'm sure he's going to have something to say. So, anyways, now let's go into Tami and Chad because it's interesting. Well, before we get into Tami and Chad, theirs is a very interesting one too. I first want to go into Lori and Alex. Alex was her brother that murdered Charles. So I hope I didn't lose you guys here. You can kind of go back because I'm going to refer to what we talked about with Lori and Chad and Lori and Charles a little bit, just sort of for the contrast and the overlays. So I noticed this right away when I was putting in Alex Cox's birth date. He was born in 1968, just like Chad. So right there I went, oh, she might have Saturn square Pluto with him. So maybe Saturn square Pluto can be a sacrificial, inward, red rum. Let's call it red rum. So I'm going to use the word sacrifice when we're talking about like the planet actually having an active role in what occurred. And then I'll use unaliving a little bit. It's not my most comfortable verbiage, but I think red rum is a better way to use the word that I want to use. So spell it forward, and that's what I'm referring to. So when it comes to Alex and Lori, again, like I said, his moon may, if he was born at like 12:01 or 12:22 a.m., his moon may have been in the sign of Leo, but most likely his moon is in Virgo, early degrees. So him and Lori also have a moon trine. Because another quick thing I'll kind of teach you guys if you haven't been following along, let me just, I had itch, okay, is that so I'm saying when a familial relationship or relationship has malefic aspects, it doesn't always play out in like a divorce, you know, or a disowning the way it will 99.9% of the time in my observations in romantic relationships. But also on the good note, or not the good note, but on like in a positive aspect, the moons again represent the mother. So if you look at families, right? Like sometimes, and I'll start with the parents, but this will kind of segue into sibling relationships. Some parents, like if they have 5 kids, like I think the Cox family did, you'll notice that some of the kids stay very close to home and very close to their parents, and other kids, like they can't wait to get out of there. And especially around, you know, age 10 to 15 years old, you'll start to notice it because you can live with someone where you don't have mood compatibility for about 10 years, you know, pretty harmoniously if there's nothing else rocking the boat in the synastry. So you'll see like some of the kids stay closer to home, closer to the mother, and some of the kids, they'll move across the world, no second guesses, never call it Christmas. And I do believe that can really come down to the moon signs. And not totally, like sometimes they won't have moon compatibility and they'll still manage to stay in touch or whatever. But if you take a family, like say of 4 children, and 2 of them left home and they barely ever hear from them, they get pictures and a call on Christmas, and 2 of the kids live down the road and make sure the parents are taken care of, most likely the 2 kids close to home are going to have moon compatibility with their parents, and the 2 kids that moved away are not. It's not always going to be that way, but you're going to see families with the moon compatibility are tighter knit. And this is because I always wondered, like, why do some kids do that and not others? Or why, like sometimes the stepchildren, you know, they choose one set of parents. They choose like the mother and the stepdad, or the father and the stepmother. And, you know, even if they were raised by the mother, it could really boil down to the moons. We can definitely at least find, and I did, if you watch the Love at First Sight video, I can probably find statistical data on that. And there is another software that does that. One of these days we'll get more into that. But anyways, going back to Alex and Lori, it does appear that most likely their moons are in a trine as well. And in so this is why they may have been you know, able to, even though like the other day Colby was saying, and I hate to like use his history, but he was saying like we didn't grow up close to him at all. Interestingly enough though, because Charles' moon would be in a trine probably a little wider to Alex's as well. So I don't feel that Alex was much of a threat to Charles and Lori's relationship through the beginning at least. So I should have looked up Charles and Alex's together. To see, maybe they had Mars conjunct Pluto. I might have to do that really quick. I don't have a whole lot of time in battery, but I just wanted to get this done while I was on it because it's a lot to digest. So Lori and Alex have Mars opposition Uranus. So that's a very on and off relationship. So this is why maybe, like Colby said, he wasn't really around. He sort of popped in and out. That's Mars opposition Uranus. Now, Mars opposition Uranus, they can still really like get along and sparks fly when they're around each other. But this is why maybe Alex wasn't actually around all that much. He popped in and out. They also have Jupiter square Neptune, that grandiose spirituality thing. That's definitely a marker for that. And then they have Mars square Neptune. So, and it's her Neptune. Alex is Mars. Mars is the god of war. I told you guys, Mars is indifferent. Mars goes to war for who he goes to war for. I might have even referred to them as an example without even knowing this. So if Mars is on the side of the allies of the United States, he's going to be the greatest warrior for that. If he's on the side, like if he's on Russia's side or Ukraine's side right now, he is going to go all in all out battle, not biased whatsoever. It's whatever side he's on, he's flavored by. So Alex's Mars square Lori's Neptune, she could have deluded him or created, and it actually says it in here, like, it can even have to do with substance abuse and stuff like that too. Neptune, I don't know if he was a drinker, but something caught my eye in this definition. I'm not going to read through it right now because we have a little more to cover here. But it can be definitely an aspect of enabling as well. So, and then, like I told you guys, because he was born in 1968, it occurred to me that Lori may have Saturn square Pluto with Alex, just as she does Chad, and lo and behold, she does. So, again, this is the crazy court cases, the crazy ending. It was definitely a toxic relationship between Lori and Alex. Maybe the only way it didn't manifest so poorly to begin with would be that Mars opposition Uranus kind of making it on and off and not too solidified. And the moon trine helped, brought some harmony. But I guess Saturn square Pluto could also represent two people doing bad things together, landing themselves in prison or dead. Right? Saturn is sacrifice. So if it's not them battling each other, it's them putting themselves in a situation. So it's kind of like I told you guys, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are my primary example of Saturn square Pluto. And it was like they had to go to court and battle even after the divorce. So they didn't just have a terrible divorce, they had a terrible court battle after that. So it's kind of the same thing here with like Chad and Lori and Alex. They didn't divorce each other. Well, not yet, or, but, and they didn't have a custody battle with each other, but they like still ended up in crazy court battles and it even resulted in deaths. So, anyways, I want to go into Alex, or I want to go into Tami and Chad really quickly before I go. Now I'm curious, who did I just say I should have run? I think I thought of running. Oh, yeah, I want to run Charles and Alex. Charles is August 17th. Because I want to see if they have Mars conjunct Pluto. That could be the best, very tight knit, but let's see. Or any indication, maybe Mars square Pluto or opposition. August 17th, 19. I know, like, you guys are coming and going, but I know some of you will appreciate this on the playback. August 17th, 19. He was born way earlier. Let's see. He's actually, that was another thing I noticed, which Synastry has nothing to do with age, but no one really ever points out. There was a pretty wide age gap between Lori and Charles. Let's see, 66 for 17 years. 17 years, I think. I'm doing the math right off the fly there. No one really pays attention to that, but I tell you guys, when it comes to Synastry, age doesn't matter. What did I just do? 60 or 54, is that it? 56. 56. Alex Cox is January 18th, 68. I already have that one in there because that was the last one I ran. That's what's kind of nice about this site. if you're running yourself against people, you don't have to keep putting yours in, where like Cafe Astrology, you have to put it in every time, both of them. Okay, so yes, they have a moon trine, Alex and Charles Vallow, and Jupiter conjunct Jupiter, which could show Jupiter can be marriage, so that could show like a harmonious in-law relationship. And they have, oh, what I say, you guys, Mars opposite Pluto. So I said Mars conjunct Pluto could represent red rum, Mars opposite Pluto, but they also have Mars opposite Jupiter, and they have Venus square Mars, which can kind of result around. So when I see male and female couples, right, I always take, because I specialize in romance first, so I take the way I see it play out in romance, and then I sort of translate it over to a familial type of or friendship type of relationship. So Venus square Mars, it's Charles Mars and Alex Venus. Venus can also be resources, Mars war, so we can look at it like that. Venus may, or Alex here, his love for his sister could be Venus, or resources, right? There was supposed to be $1 million life insurance policy. He was probably going to get a cut of that. And then we have Charles Mars, his actual like being and living, and so, well, Charles was also aggravated at this point. So his Mars coming up against Alex, maybe thinking there was some money in it, could definitely been a financial motivation for Alex. But what we'll see, I do have it as a deal breaker divorce aspect, especially when the woman is Mars and the man is Venus. But even when it's harmonious and the woman is Venus and the man is Mars, you will see it in marriages lasting about 15 to 20 years. But it usually does end in quite an altercation or quite a blowout. Like they could have had no physical violence or no, police called the whole time, and it will end sort of in that sort of way where someone's getting escorted out of the house. So Venus square Mars could be where it came in. They also had Venus trine Mars. So, Charles did like Alex, they had their moons were trine, but it did result in, I don't necessarily, Mars opposite Jupiter can work out. Mars opposition Pluto, usually in romantic relationships, would be more like a rubber band, pulling back, where the two might feel the need to bond, but there's just some tension. So maybe that was something that snapped too, but was playing out in a slightly different way, as they're both men and their brother-in-laws. So I would say the huge blowout was Venus square Mars, but the actual red rum, what I would connotate to the Mars opposition Pluto. Even though Mars opposition Jupiter is not great, I don't think that would necessarily, it can result in physical violence, but I don't know that it would result in red rum necessarily. I do think I did Gabby Petito and Brian's as well, and I believe they had like, I think they had like Mars square opposition Saturn, but with them, I don't know that I actually had their right birth times or days. Sorry. So the last one we're going to go over quickly here, because I do find it quite interesting, is Tami and Chad's. So remember how I told you, I mentioned it, I believe, with Colby and Lori. Venus sextile Mars is a great romance aspect, but it also, Venus and Mars can play a great role in parent-children relationships. More so for me, indicators of this is a parent-child relationship, but or one where they like do have love or adore each other. But Venus sextile Mars is more so a friendship aspect. So I remember looking up a chart with one of my friends who I'm not, who I had kind of friend zoned, and he's a great person, and there's just no real reason why I shouldn't date him or something. But I don't know, he just felt like a friend to me, and our moons weren't compatible. And also, I'm like thinking it might have been quintessile, but and we had very few aspects. Now, that was one other thing that I noticed about Colby and his mother's chart, is they have a lot of aspects. So when I see that, I usually say it's a very complicated relationship. And so there can be a lot of history there as well, or that there would be a lot of history if we're doing it predictively. But if it's a romantic relationship and there's a lot of aspects, I say usually I don't think outside forces necessarily play a part in whether a couple will make it, aside from looking at the planets and how they're going to put that pressure on someone, on a couple. But when there's a lot of aspects, usually there's going to be outside forces that are intervening and getting in the way. So with that being said, I do believe here that Tami and Chad did have Venus sextile Mars, and it was Tammy's Venus and Chad's Mars. So they did fall in love initially. That can be sort of a puppy love thing. So when they were young and they met, that could have created a romance and puppy love. And over the years, they say, always marry, be with someone who's your friend first. So that could have sustained them as far as a friendship. But I honestly don't think that after that initial Venus sextile Mars, maybe the first 4 years of their relationship, I think after that it was sort of a friend zone relationship. And I'm not going to go into all their other aspects today because it would be interesting to dig a little more. But what really pops out to me aside from that aspect is they have Mars square Jupiter going both ways. And to me, I've never seen a marriage lasting 20 plus years. I've seen it with the opposition, but not with the square. Um, I don't want to say I've never seen it. I very, 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 very rarely see it. And when I do, I have a hard time quantifying it because most couples with Mars square Jupiter don't last. So I guess I could just read through the aspect of it to kind of, or what I wrote about it to kind of, as we go out, because I'm going to wrap it up here, because again, limited time, a lot of details. But um, I'll just read this one to you guys so I don't get all over the place, and then I'll kind of ad lib. But it's quite a long one that I wrote. But this says, this is one of the worst aspects to have in Synastry. I would say Saturn square Pluto's the worst. That's what Chad and Lori have. Again, if you want to read the definitions yourself, you can go to divinetimedatabase.com/stars and you can enter their birth dates. You can Google it. I'll just give you their birthdates really quick if you want to go. So again, Lori and Chad. Lori is June 26, 1973, and Chad is August 11th, 1968. And for Tami and Chad, Tami is May 4th, 1970. I just said Chad's, so I'll tell you guys. Charles is August 17th, 1956. It's interesting, too, that Chad and Charles their sons are both in Leo, in the third decan of Leo. So the same sort of rulership of Leo there. Similar personalities as far as just the personality of the sun. Nothing. And so I wonder if I should look, if anything, really quick. I don't want to get too far off here, but does Lori have anything? Yeah, her Mars. Let's see, their sun, 18 degrees Leo. Her Uranus trines that. Uranus trine Sun. That can make it actually hard to officialize a relationship. But it can actually help too with like relationships where there's traveling and stuff. Like Charles traveled a lot for work, or unconventional relationships. Uranus trine Sun can work well there. So her Uranus was trine their sons. That's the only thing I really see of significance with their sons being at that degree of Leo. But something might come up and we'll do a part 2 if I go, aha, oh, that's what was trining it. Because her Mars is 3 degrees Aries, so that would be kind of a wide trine to the sun in Leo. But if she was going to have repetitive relationships with it, with the same, birthdays, because you'll see that sometimes they'll be like, my first husband, my second, and my third husband all had the same birthday, but the third time's a charm. So anyways, there's usually some planet that their energy is familiar aspecting to that. And again, she does have that opposition of Uranus to Mars with her brother. So maybe that sort of sporadic energy was a little comfortable for her. All right. Anyways, so I'm just going to read you guys Mars square Jupiter because Tami and Chad had this going both ways. So I do feel after the first, I want to say 6 months, honestly, it could have been Chad. I would honestly say Chad might have just saw, oh, she's cool. I can control this situation. There's romance. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't get married fairly quickly, but I could be wrong about that. It would either be like they got married in the first 6 months, or it took a little while and was dragged out. It's just such a friend zoney relationship. Mars square Jupiter does have a strong physical attraction as well, especially initially. So I'm kind of curious now if they got married right away. Because Mars square Jupiter, if they didn't, Jupiter again is marriage and legality. So that might be the only way to cure it. I tell you guys all the time too, I think Mars square Jupiter may be where they have those shotgun weddings, like Kim Kardashian and Britney Spears, their very first little weddings they had that lasted I think it was Chris Humphries with Kim, but they lasted only a few months. I wouldn't be surprised if there was Mars square Jupiter in those connections, because it's like they hit it off, they feel like they've met the one. And then if they legalize it, it still ends. But it could be with Jupiter, if you legalize it, because Jupiter really recognizes legal marriage and bestows blessings on it, that maybe that's a cure around Mars square Jupiter. So it's like if you meet someone with Mars square Jupiter, you're going to have a strong physical attraction. You're going to feel like you've met the one. But then you're going to go either uh you could, if you have a throwaway marriage to have, you could try marrying the person, because either you're going to be divorced within a few months, or that might be the cure. It's probably, everything's sort of a spectrum, so it's going to be one or the other, and no guarantee of either. It's not me guessing, it's going to be one or the other, most likely. Okay, so anyways, um but if you don't solidify the marriage quickly, then it's either going to drag on for years and years, or you'll never get married. But anyways, this is one of the worst aspects to have in Synastry. This is another one that Madeline was put on Earth to warn clients of. This aspect creates a strong attraction at first, which generally results in a 2 to 4 month whirlwind romance and hot fling. Mars and Jupiter are friendly planets to one another, so at first it will seem destined, or like you have finally met your match. But then one, usually Tami in this case, will disengage and possibly ghost. Now, they have it going both ways. So I told you guys I write this where the names get inserted. So it can also be Chad in this case, because they have it going both ways. Really quick too, because there is red rum involved here. I want to see what's going on with their Mars and Pluto's. Mars and Gemini. Her Mars squares his Pluto at 11-degree orb. That's about it there. Okay. Her Saturn squares his Sun, so she put a lot of obligations on him. Venus square Venus, they really didn't have a lot in common. Very different styles. I'm not seeing one that necessarily leads to red rum, although Mars square Jupiter can have violence in it. So they could have had like closeted DV going on. Like he could have, but to me, I feel like they were just like this weird friend zone-y relationship where it might have been romantic in the beginning and very hot attraction, and maybe they got married because they were religious and they wanted to do things properly. But I feel that that faded away within 6 months to 4 years. And again, they were together a very long time. And then they probably just got very comfortable, and due to religious beliefs as well, probably didn't feel divorce was okay. But this definitely wasn't an ideal relationship behind closed doors. They were very probably indifferent to each other after this initial strong thing wore off. But let me just get through this. So, but then one will disengage and possibly ghost. More often than they slowly back away, leaving the other hanging sometimes for years. When one inquires about this connection in a reading, he or she is generally trying to make a judgment or decision on it because he or she is having a hard time understanding the other's behavior. It's hard to read this without doing their names now. One usually gets very upset and even competitive or combative when the other starts to withdraw. Often, one will stay convinced that the other was the one that got away for many years following. The amount of recovery time and grief of the loss is based on the potential of the other aspects in the synastry. If there are other really good aspects, then this loss is all the more devastating and disappointing. They both may be in denial for several months or years after the breakup and continue to entertain the idea of reconciling someday. Now, this is in the general case where they usually break up in the first 6 months. And then it says they can sometimes continue to connect on and off for many years, with each rendezvous being a shorter amount of time together than the previous meetup. So that could also be if they manage to contain this within a household, because usually that's not how it's playing out. They'll kind of be like coworkers or schoolmates, and kind of be, oh, well, you're in a relationship, and then, oh, they broke up, and now they're kind of meeting up. So maybe in a household contained, it was like, maybe they spent a lot of time together in the beginning, and then it was kind of like, oh, and then they just kind of started doing their own thing and became indifferent a little bit to each other. But anyways, they can sometimes continue to connect on and off for many years, with each rendezvous being a shorter amount of time together than the previous meetup. We can see these are the two colleagues or schoolmates that crush on or hook up for years, yet can't quite figure out why they always end up in relationships with others and not each other. When they are both available again, they may reunite between relationships for a short period of time. It's kind of what I just said, summarized. This is an aspect that really illuminates how having so many options in this world doesn't mean that you can just choose who you like, as destiny may supersede free will in some instances. If they do somehow manage to get married because the other positive aspects are strong enough, those aspects will only delay the inevitable here. Mars is the planet of combat and war, and Jupiter is the general. In a square, they will soon come to find that they have totally different alliances and goals. It will be nearly impossible to get on the same page, as when one starts to spend time when one wants to spend time together, the other is off on some mission. Quite interesting, right? Because he was always out of the house, like doing his little podcasts and book things. Um, and when they return home, the other is focused elsewhere, right? She was always doing her other little things. And so people think they were balancing that. In reality, they were just didn't care to be around each other, really. Or, there might have been a little angst, like when one got home, oh, the other one's gone now, I better entertain myself. So maybe they were just really good at entertaining themselves. Writers are pretty good at entertaining themselves. And she was a librarian, so I'm sure she was a writer. She was in his publishing company. She ran it as well, I believe, to some extent. Anyways, it's also not a great one for business partnership, Mars square Jupiter. But anyways, I'm not, especially Saturn square Pluto. If you have that, don't get in a business partnership, battle over resources. I hate to call a client out, but I've even seen where the two like briefly hooked up and worked in the same, I'm going to say where they worked, not to call them out, hospital, right? That's a huge institution. They worked on different floors. They dated a couple times, and it was actually her that was like, yeah, I'm good, I'm over it. And she still went so far as to get him fired from the hospital. It was like he was just ready to be done with it too. He wasn't harassing her. He wasn't like obsessed with her, and she got him fired. So it's just like Saturn square Pluto, battle over resources. Okay, anyways. So if you have it, I don't even recommend, if you have it with someone, this is why you should run the charts. I don't even recommend having a fling with them. But anyways, okay. So often the one that wanted it the most will be surprised at their sudden loss of interest once they get the other's undivided attention. This aspect is extremely masculine energy and very rarely breeds children between the two. That's why it's interesting that I almost wonder if I have her birthday wrong, because I mean, they had a lot of kids. Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are an example of how this aspect plays out in a marriage. They had this and Saturn square Pluto. So they had what Chad and Lori have and what Chad and Tami had. But I mean, I could have her birth date wrong, Tami's. Sometimes the internet, it wasn't like a Wikipedia site that I got it off of. So, even Wikipedia sometimes has to be, updated and isn't totally accurate. But they have some very specific examples of trying to keep one another in the same location on the same page to little avail, despite their Venus conjunction that brought them together so effortlessly. That's talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So for them, it was the Venus conjunction that helped supersede. So one last thing, well, for a while. One last thing is, one other little note about Tami and Chad that might have been a little bit of a cure why they were able to get married and have kids, if this is, the correct birth dates, and they did have Mars square Jupiter going both ways, aside from they might have officialized it very quickly. It is possible. I couldn't confirm Chad's moon. It's about 50-50. He was either in Pisces, which would explain sort of the interest in spirituality and stuff like that. Right, at least the interest in writing about it. Writing can be imagination, so the fictional writing of it. But it also could be in early degrees Aries, and it does appear, I did look up, okay, so when I did hers, oh, this was, I did, okay, excuse my French. Let me see if I can just go back to hers. Ah, dang it. Her moon, I looked up as well, I think is most likely in Aries, but it could be early degrees Taurus. So Chad's is about 50-50. It could be 50% Pisces, which would make a lot of sense to me, or 50% Aries. And hers is, I think it's about 50-50 too. So if they were married, as long as they were, especially, I would assume that their moons were either in a sextile, like his moon is in Pisces and hers is in Taurus, and it would be a wide orb sextile because his would be late degrees Pisces and hers would be early degrees Taurus. But I've seen that before in couples that also can just, I tell you, like a lot of times couples, if the moons are compatible and there's no malefic deal breakers, they won't divorce. But it will become sort of this like friend zoned, like exless, or not exless, passionateless, maybe sex-less marriage. So that would kind of make sense to me a lot. But also on the other hand, it would make sense if they had this really wide orb friendly sign moon conjunction, right? And that would make a little more sense as far as overpowering Mars square Jupiter. So we went through this with the Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, how I said, their moons are in this very wide, uh, their moons are both in Scorpio, but it's very wide. It's over 20 degrees because we have their actual degrees. So maybe with these two, it could possibly be that their moons were barely, because right, he would be early degrees Aries and she would be late degrees Aries, but it could still be within 20 degrees. Like his moon could have been 10 degrees Aries and her moon could have been 25 degrees Aries, and that's a 15-degree orb. And that right there could, a 10 to 15-degree orb with the moons in a conjunction in the same sign could potentially soften these other aspects and just make them live well enough together that they just kind of found their corners of the house and didn't have to force each other on the same page. Although I do feel there were frustrations with Mars square Pluto, with Mars square Jupiter. Could have been as bad as there was secret DV, that we don't know about and that the kids don't speak about. Everyone's been conditioned that it was quite volatile under the surface and they were just very good at hiding it. Or it could be something just as soft as, they just didn't care and they were indifferent towards each other. But I think it was probably somewhere in between where it was just like, oh, okay, he kind of tried to get laid today and she kind of snubbed him. And so he kind of went and looked at some corn, as like Nick Jones, the creator, says, or he went and started entertaining these women at the book signings, and then maybe she like was kind of into him, but he was interested in someone else. Like it was probably more of a back and forth. Like they probably hooked up once every couple years, type of relationship. That's my assumption. But I definitely could see where there could be some tension, some irritation, some resentment that could possibly build where, there could be the coldness or callousness of Mars. Like, okay, I'm on Team Lori now. So Mars is going to operate against Jupiter, the general, and take the general out, you know? Maybe when he was on Team Tami, it was like bearable, but once he got on Team Lori, it was like his Mars square her Jupiter, Jupiter's marriage. It's like, I'm done with this marriage, so I'm just going to take it out, you know? So anyways, this is just me sort of trying to teach astrology. If you know that, so if those of you that are going to resonate with this video are the best are going to be the ones that are actually interested in synastry and actually know the case, which is going to be sort of a niche, right? So I know a lot of you probably popped in and out of here thinking that it's about the case and going, oh, I don't care anything about astrology. And some of you probably popped in and out of here about astrology, like, well, I don't know anything about this case, so maybe you're going to learn about it now. But anyways, so I'm sending you all lots of love and light. If you are interested in, especially if you're dating online, which I really don't recommend, but, if you've been in the same pond for a while, sometimes it's good to cast your net wider. Do check out moonmatch.love. It's the database. The entry, if you use the promo for this month, is 50% off. So you can enter the database and auto search and make sure that you don't end up with someone that you have Saturn square Pluto or Mars square Jupiter with, and maybe have a happy life with them. So definitely check out moonmatch.love if you're single, or if you know anyone that is. If you believe in astrology enough to look up your moon sign and see if not your moon, your sun sign, which is, if you know you're a Capricorn or an Aries or a Gemini, then you might as well look just a little bit deeper, because otherwise you're kind of it's kind of like going, oh, I don't know. I don't have a good analogy for it, but I got to head out because my man is headed home right now and we got to figure out what's for dinner. So I'm sending you all lots of love and light. I'll be back on Monday to do the or it might be Tuesday. We'll see the outer planets and their cycles. And if you want to check that out, just look for the playlist. I didn't link it in the description, but the first link below in this video is the link to moonmatch.love, which I really recommend. If you ever want me to look over your birth chart or your relationship in depth, go to rotation411.com. All right, love and light. Peace out.